Session ceasing pen testing includes the same process as that of the session hijacking assault. For this, first the pen tester must spot a session. He can look for different possibilities to hijack a session. It may vary depending upon the system and the components they use for communication. Now, we are going to highlight a few key steps that you can follow to carry out pen testing. First, find a great target session through packet sniffing. Keep in mind that you would want to take control over it. Then check whether the session ID is included as part of the URL. If so, check if it has been encoded. If the session ID is not part of the URL, then sniff the session movement between two machines.
That's right. Next, sniff session traffic between two systems by using different tools such as Wireshark, CasePoint, WinDump, CAPTCHA, Network Analyzer, and so on. Now, watch the session movement and snatch the session from the exploited person's system activity. Then, check if the session is encrypted or not. If it's encoded, then they prematurely end the session or use Trojans to perform session hijacking. If the session is not included, then you can recover the session ID.
Right, so that would be the third step to recover the session ID. If you are not able to get hold of session IDs from the unencrypted session, use automated tools such as Pairs Proxy, Burp Suite, and Web Scarab. If the session ID is recovered, check whether it is encoded or not. If you can figure out the algorithm used to generate the session ID, then you should be able to generate session IDs or recover one. If the session ID is encrypted, then work to decipher the session ID. If the session ID is not encrypted, then you can send phishing mails to carry out session fixation.
Step 4 is cracking the session ID encryption. Now, you'll crack the session ID in the event that it is URL encrypted. Deciphering the encrypted session IDs gives the original session IDs of the victim's session. Now, you're aware of that the session IDs are used in authentication. So if you can get a hold of a session ID, then you can get yourself into the session and carry out attack activities. Now, if you're successful in decrypting the session ID, you should be able to use it for session fixation using phishing mails. Step 5 is going to be to make a normal connection with one of the machines. So if you have the credentials, then you can initiate a normal connection with one of the machines and carry out, or you can access other machines in the network as someone with genuine credentials within the network.
Right. The sixth step is to collect several session IDs so that you can cause them to analyze and arrive at a pattern. You can get these either from cookies in the response header or from the response body. For step 7, predict a new session ID based on the session IDs collected.
That's right. Next, step 8 is relying or replaying new session IDs to one or more parties from the session IDs that you've collected. So if you're able to establish a connection, the transactions get replicated. So the 9th step would then be to issue the brute force technique to calculate session IDs to establish connectivity, in case you're not able to establish a connection in the previous try. And then finally, document all the findings so that you can analyze them further.
Correct.